Good afternoon, everyone. I'm doing, as promised, a presentation here on a rent-to-own contract that you can use to buy a home. You can use rent-to-own to buy a lot of things, such as furniture and appliances, but you can also use a rent-to-own contract to buy a home. It's used by people who have had problems with their credit due to a divorce or getting laid off from a job or for various reasons. If you can't qualify to get a mortgage, you can do, if you're really interested in buying a home, you can do what's called rent to own. Two different ways to buy a mortgage, of course, is are two different ways to buy a home, of course, is a mortgage or doing a rent-to-own contract. A mortgage is the safest way and probably has the most advantages. But a rent-to-own contract is also good to, is a good way to buy a home if you're interested in doing that. I did another video here earlier today about what a mortgage is and the various things involved in getting a mortgage and how a mortgage works. Mainly it's about how a mortgage works. And you need to understand when you do rent to own, those things are still involved. Whatever the house is worth is the principal, and your monthly rent or your monthly payment is going to depend, of course, on what the house is worth. There's also the owner of the home is also going to expect you to pay a little bit of interest, and also there's taxes and insurance that needs to be paid. This is fire and casualty insurance here, and these taxes are paid to the county. There's also maintenance of the home that's going to need to be done, and improvements if you want to do any improvements to the home. So if you want to do a rent to own, here are some suggestions. I recommend that you definitely get the contract notarized. You can take the contract and go with the owner or the renter of the property to any bank, and they'll generally notarize it for free. Won't cost you a penny. You could also get legal review, and that's always a good idea. Get a lawyer to take a look at the paperwork. They'll generally do that for you for maybe a few $100s, and maybe give you some recommendations or rewrite a paragraph or two for you. As long as the owners or the person that's renting you the property or doing rent to own with you agree with that, they should go ahead and sign it without a problem. A lawyer, of course, can also get you and the owner in their office and get you to sign the paperwork and notarize it right there in the office for you. Of course, you know, that is if the owner will go along with that, and who pays for those fees is another question. I would imagine that if you want to get that done, a legal review and legal notarization, maybe even getting them to file the paperwork for you in the courthouse, or file some sort of paperwork for you, then you'd probably be responsible for those fees. My suggestion is to do it, even if you can't get a mortgage. It's better to eventually own a home than to rent a place for life. And I see people out here 70 and 80 years old still renting homes. And what you need to do early on in life is to try to buy yourself a home, so that when you get old and you have limited income, you don't have to be paying rent. Advantages to doing a rent to own is that you eventually own the property. that with if you get a mortgage, you'll have closing costs, you'll have fees, you'll have loan points. It costs money to buy a home. You also have a down payment that you're going to have to pay, um, and other things. And you advantages to you is that you do the repairs and the maintenance. Now, why is it an advantage for you to do the repairs? Well, when a lot of owners of rental properties do repairs, they'll do just a basic repair, maybe using substandard parts, or maybe just put it back together as quickly as they possibly can to fix it. But if you do the repairs yourself, you can take your time and use high quality parts and really uh, uh, do it a lot better job if you take your time and do it right. Also, any maintenance that's done, you can do the same thing. You can, instead of doing a quick job to get the base in basic working order, you can take your time and really do a good job on it. Also, advantage, of course, is that your rent payment is fixed over the period of the contract. Um, Disadvantages is there's a lot less protection. You don't have the equity build up generally in a rent to own that you do in a mortgage, and a lot of rent to own contracts do not allow you to pay off the thing early. Also, they're generally not assumable, and even a mortgage is generally not assumable unless you have the bank or the lending institution's permission for the loan to be assumed. They generally have to approve the buyer of the home, check their credit, check their income, go through the whole thing. It's almost like the person's getting a new mortgage. Also, disadvantages that you're doing the maintenance yourself and you're having to pay for that. So um, there are advantages to the owner. Certainly, there's advantages to the owner. Otherwise, no owner would be willing to do a rent to own with you. One advantage to the owner is they have a long-term tenant. They don't have to worry about people moving in and out of the place every 6 months or a year and having to repaint the place and clean it out and um, so forth. Another advantage to the owner is that you as a renter or a rent to own person are doing the repairs. So the owner does not have to pay for those. Generally, you pay for those repairs. And it's generally a lot less hassle for them if they've got a good rent-to-own person than it is for them to deal with renters moving in and out all the time. Now, a disadvantage to owner is that they can't raise your rent. If you get a rent-to-own contract for like 20 years, then that rent is stable. So you got to realize that it might be a little bit higher right in the very beginning, but in the long term, uh, it's going to really pay off for you because if inflation starts really kicking in, I mean your rents can double in a matter of a few years. So that might be a big disadvantage to the owner is that they can't raise the rent. So you got to realize that you have advantages and they have advantages, but plus there's disadvantages to you and disadvantages to them. Now, I have a lot of people trying to get me to do rent to own for them, and what I tell people and what I'm going to continue to tell people is that we're going to go through this trial period. I want to see how good of a renter you are and how good of you are at making your payments and making your payments on time. So I'm not going to do rent to own with anybody unless they rent for at least a year and show me that they pay their rent and they pay their rent on time. If they do that, then I'll do rent to own with them. I don't have a problem. Now, there may or may not be a down payment required. Some owners may want you to put $1,000 or a couple $1,000 down as a down payment on this rent-to-own contract. Just like if you do a mortgage, you're going to have to do a down payment. So some sellers or owners of property may want you to do a down payment. Also, they may want you to get a mortgage eventually. And what generally, if you look up on the internet, look up rent to own, they'll say, a lot of the articles that you pull up will say that it's used for you to, these contracts are actually used for like a couple of years so that you can get your credit improved so that you can eventually get a mortgage. You don't necessarily have to do that. A rent-to-own contract can run for like 30 years. It does not necessarily have to require you to eventually get a mortgage. So now, in summation here, let me say this about rent-to-own: is if you can't get a mortgage, if your credit's not good enough to get a mortgage, or you don't make income that is reportable on like a W-2 form, that is sufficient for getting a mortgage. And a lot of people, like contractors, they may make a whole lot of money, but they may not make a whole lot of reportable income on their taxes. So if you want to buy a home and you want to do rent to own, and you find somebody that wants to do it with you, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. And that's an old saying, and basically what that meant was that if somebody gives you a horse, you can look at the teeth of a horse, and you can generally tell how old they are, and you can tell a lot about the horse's health. So somebody's doing you a favor when they're agreeing to do rent to own with you. So don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Also, don't try to deal too toughly, because they don't have to do rent to own with you. I mean, they can go ahead and rent the property out to you without doing rent to own, or they can rent the property out to somebody else. Also, don't expect too much as far as terms is concerned. Don't expect a super high, low interest rate and super high, super low monthly payment. The sellers are doing you a favor when they do rent to own with you. So you need to realize that and be a little bit thankful and grateful. But anyway, that's a little bit about rent to own contracts, and I think that they're very useful. I think that just like anything else, it's caveat emptor, which means buyer beware. So you need to be careful. Any sort of contract that you get involved in, they can work out really good for people. My mother did rent to own with a couple people, and they eventually wound up owning those homes. So it can work out good for you. Anyway, that is the situation. So I think it can be a good deal for you. So that's a little bit of information about rent to own, and also view the video on home mortgages that I've got on the YouTube here. It'll help you understand a little bit about mortgages and how they work. Please subscribe if you would to my channel, and thanks a lot for watching the video. Thanks.